Hello chess fans, in today's video we're going to check out not one, but two fantastic attacking games played by Hans Niemann as he continues his own organized matches against very strong grandmasters. It's the third match after Anish Giri and Nikita Fichukov. He is now playing against Etienne Bacrot, very strong grandmaster from France. And these two games are absolutely amazing. A lot of spectacular ideas. And I will show you the ins and outs because actually the opening we are going to see, let's bring up the first couple of moves, e4, c5, knight f3, e6. It's the Sicilian, d4, pawn takes d4, knight c6, knight c3, queen c7. It's the Sicilian Taimanov variation. It's considered to be a very solid opening line for black, trying to avoid the sharper, crazy lines from, for instance, other Sicilians like the Dragon or the Najdorf. And interesting news for you, as I've recorded a DVD for ChessBase on this topic, so you may check out the interesting lines I'm recommending on that DVD. Hans is going for this variation with the move bishop e3, and after a6, the move queen f3. It's a very popular line. It's now there for about 5 to 10 years. A lot of games have been played with this move, and there are different ways of playing here for black. Now, interestingly, Etienne Bacrot played here the move b5, and we will discuss these games. I just want to mention that on my own DVDs, I'm recommending this move h5, which is a very typical idea in a lot of variations within this Sicilian Taimanov opening. Idea is that later on, for instance, a knight can come via f6 to g4. It's a nice outpost for the knight. Also, the h-pawn can be pushed very soon. And it has become popular since a famous game played in Wijk aan Zee between Abdusattorov and Jordan van Forest. So if you're interested, make sure to check out that DVD. I will put it in the description below this video. Let's get back to the game. Bacrot played the move b5, and pretty sure that Hans Niemann prepared for this because Bacrot had played this move b4. In that game, he played against David Navarro, who played the move queen g3. It's one of these ideas to swap queens and recapture with the h-pawn, so that the rook from h1 will become active without moving it. But a much sharper and more principled move even is to take with the knight on c6. Now black does take back with the queen, and there's always potential pressure down the c-file or along this diagonal with queen and bishop. So white played here the move bishop d3, defending both pawns. Everything is well supported. But now anyway, Etienne Bacrot played here the move h5. So this is, as I said, a typical idea in a lot of lines. But as you can see, we have played 9 moves so far, a lot of pawn moves, and only the queen has been developed. And what is black going to do with these pieces being placed on the back rank? Now let's go ahead. a4 played. White is putting pressure on the queen side. Black pushes the pawn to b4, hitting the knight on c3. The knight goes back to b1. It's not a loss of time because the knight wants to rejoin play via d2. That's what happens in the game. Knight f6, knight e2, and knight is defending the pawn, but can also come to c4 very soon. Now, the first game I'm going to show you, it's the 4th game in this match. In that game, Bacrot played this move, knight to g4. So he really wants to get this bishop on e3. Now, white can do various things, but white played here the move knight c4. Interesting idea. And black decided to take this bishop. Knight takes e3. Pawn takes e3. Remarkable decision. There were possibilities to take with either the queen or the knight, but white voluntarily weakens his pawn structure. Isolated double pawns in the center, but he does have an open file. He would like to use that file with the rook coming there. So imagine that white is able to get this pressure there. The black king will easily get in trouble. How should black defend? Well, probably in hindsight, this move, f6, to ensure that there's no pressure against the pawn on f7. Pawn is well defended by the pawn on g7. And probably very soon the bishop may come to b7. Still complicated position, but at least there's no pressure down the f-file. Compared with the game where Bacrot played this move d6, Now white can castle and threaten to take on f7. Black's idea was here to defend the pawn with rook a7 so that the mating threat is gone. But look now, white. How is white going to improve his position? Not an easy move at all, but Hans is playing on all sides of the board. And that makes it very difficult for black to defend. Here the move a5 is very important move as it prepares the knight to come in to b6. Look at this. Rook c7 played, knight b6. Here the bishop comes to b7. Looks as if black has managed to coordinate his forces on the queen side. But then again, you would love to break through on the king side. But this rook on c7 is an annoying defender. How to eliminate that rook? Well, look at this. The move c3 is the key idea to open up the queen side. Now, if you do take with the pawn, which was not played by Bacrot, there is rook a c1. And the idea is that you take back on c3, hit the queen, and all of a sudden, look at this queen. The queen doesn't have any good squares to go to. So a lot of problems here for black. Therefore, black decided instead to keep the c-file closed by playing the move b3. And now you cannot go rook c1 because the pawn on c3 is there. But there's an alternative way to activate the rook. And look at this. It's rook a4. Now, since the pawn has moved to b3, the rook can use the fourth rank to come to c4 with similar ideas as described earlier. Black therefore played the move d5, taking away the c4 square. But now after pawn takes, the center gets more and more open. And look at this rook. The rook comes over now to the king side. Rook f4. What an original way of activating that rook. I mean, 5 moves ago, you would not have expected that rook to land on f4. Now, it does hit the pawn on f7 one more time. Queen e6 therefore played to defend the pawn. And here, very interesting position, as there are various options. Probably the best move is to go here rook f5 to hit the pawn on d5 one more time. But Hans played this. He played bishop f5 to attack the queen. Now the queen goes to e5. And look at this. Hans played bishop to g6. Very spectacular move, as the bishop can't be taken, as it hangs the other bishop on f8. Beautiful idea. But what should black do? Well, black played bishop d6, getting the bishop into the game, ignoring the pawn on f7. Bishop takes f7 with check. White is winning a pawn, but the position is incredibly sharp and difficult to calculate. Now, here Bacrot made a very serious mistake by moving the king away. But if you're really fighting for the initiative as black, you should consider forcing moves and eliminate the bishop on f7. Let me show you the following line. It's really, really nice. If you take on f7 and white recaptures, then it's queen takes h2, the bishop supporting the queen. King f2, and the line even goes further with a stunning idea. d4, discovered attack on the queen, and the bishop can be taken in 2 different ways. If you do take with the rook, well, there is rook f8 and the queen is gone. It's completely unclear at this point. Now, if you would take with the queen instead, then the queen is no longer helping the king in defense, and black is able to save the game here with the move. Queen g3, check. If you go back to g1, it's queen h2 with a repetition, while if you go to the center with king e2, it's queen takes e3, king d1, queen d3. Now you shouldn't go to c1 because of checkmate on c2. And well, therefore you got to go back to e1, but then it's queen e3 with a repetition. With missed opportunity for Bacrot to save the game. He instead played here the move king to d8. But now, okay, the king is stuck in the middle and white can just take with the bishop on d5. And now he's up 2 pawns. And of course you got to be careful still because there's potential pressure against the pawn on h2. Look at this, g5 played, trying to kick the rook away. Rook just goes to f6. It's a nice stable spot for this piece. Queen takes pawn, king f2. King is absolutely safe. And well, if black cannot do anything, then white is just dominating the center with his forces, like the queen supports the bishop. Maybe the rook can even come to the d file. A lot of ideas. g4 played, attacking the queen. The queen comes in to f5. And well, the position gets better and better every move. move like queen g3 just will be met by king e2 and everything is under control as the bishop defends backwards. So instead, Bacrot tried here to move rook e7, but now it's also just a game over. King e2 is a very, very nice and simple move, I would say. Getting out of this check with queen g3, queen takes e3 ideas. Now the king is safe on e2, sorry. And one of the main points is that if you do take the bishop, it's checkmate in one on c8, thanks to that fantastic knight. And well, other moves they're also not really gonna help. For instance, if you put your rook on the e file, it's bishop takes b7. If you do take back the bishop, it's queen c8 with check, king e7, rook e6 with checkmate, and White's major forces just dominate the center with this checkmate pattern. And instead of taking the bishop, let's say if you go rook takes e3, king d1, doesn't solve the problems. White will be up a piece and it's just completely crushing. So that was basically the first game after the move king e2. Bacrot had seen enough and he resigned. But he is actually quite a good theoretician. He has been second of many world-class players, including his fellow countryman Maxime Vachellagraphe. So he works on his openings. And basically what happened in another black game Bacrot played with Hans in this match, they reached the same position on move 12. So after White's last move knight d2, instead of the move knight to g4, Bacrot played now in the other game the move bishop to b7. So here we go again, and look at this. This is getting even more exciting. So bishop b7, castling kingside, queen c7. So the queen goes back to this diagonal, opens up the path for the bishop on b7. Nice idea, of course. And well, one idea is also going to be shown very soon, because well, with the queen on c7, you're preparing the move knight to g4 with mating threat on h2. So therefore h3 played, but now black played this move d5. So here you see you want to remove the pawn on e4 to attack the queen on f3. Now Hans played the move bishop to d4. He wants to put pressure against that knight on f6, but now the game is heating up here with the move e5. Black is getting a bit provoked here, moving the pawn to e5, hitting the bishop, and the bishop is not going to move. Queen g3, the pawn on e5 is pinned. You can't take the bishop as it hangs the queen. Bishop to d6, so you are supporting the pawn on e5, but now queen takes g7 is a pawn sacrifice. But now there is this move, king to e7. Black accepts that the king can stay in the center as the bishop is in trouble. But there's also another huge threat of getting the rook to g8 when the queen doesn't have any square to go to. Now White thought, okay, I need to retreat my queen, bring my queen into safety. Queen g5, excellent idea, with the point that if the bishop is taken, White can react with e5, attacking the bishop and the knight. If you do take the pawn, this bishop is going to be lost because of this huge pin on the e file. And the queen and rook are attacking the bishop. This is going to be game over. Back to the game. Instead of taking the bishop, you want to get your rook involved. But after, let's say, rook ag8, there's queen h4. And the queen is all of a sudden pretty safe. Now, Bacrot thought, let's go for this move, h4, so that the queen can't go to that square. The rook is defending the pawn. Rook ag8 is an idea. Maybe rook to h5 is another idea. But look now what happens. White, once again, ignores the bishop. Because if the bishop goes back to e3, there is rook ag8. And the queen is in huge trouble. So, instead, White played the move f4. Absolutely insane position, as everything in the center can be taken here. Rook ag8 played, attacking the queen. And the queen goes to f5, only square to go. And still, if you take the bishop, White has ideas to play e5 and regain the piece. The center will be opened. Looks very promising. But rook h5 played here. The queen is under threat and cannot go anywhere. Hans is losing his queen. Or better said, he had seen all of this in advance. I'm pretty sure about it. And look at this amazing queen sacrifice he contemplated here with the move pawn takes e5. Opening up the f-file. For the rook, black of course accepts the challenge, needs to take the queen. Rook takes f5 and now pawn takes d6 with check. Queen takes d6, rook takes f5. Let's pause here for a second because we have this position in which white is having a rook and a bishop for the queen. But there's also the idea to take on f6, so the knight is in trouble. Now, if you, for instance, take on e4 when everything is hanging, well, the key move for white is to play the move bishop to c5, and well, then you're losing your queen. So that is actually not going to work. And basically the same happens if you do take with a knight on e4. You can just take back with your knight, and after pawn takes e4, there is bishop c5 with the same idea of winning the queen. So black is having, despite the material advantage, he's having a very hard time because of the numerous threats here. Even e5 attacking the queen and knight is another super strong threat. So black desperately plays here the move rook takes g2. It's a rook sacrifice, looking for counterplay. King takes, and then the queen comes in to g3. King f1, queen takes, h3 with check. Very complicated position. Where to go with the king? White wants to find a way to interfere with one of his pieces to solve the check. Let's say if you go to g1, it's queen g3, and probably it's leading to a repetition of moves. Well, white played here the move king to e1, very understandable, and I think the engine said that king e2 is even a better idea, but to be honest, feels like a very difficult move to make, because knight h5 is an interesting move. Like knight g3 can be considered, and the knight cannot be taken. It runs into queen g4 with a double attack. So anyway, king e1 played. I think it's a very logical move to put a king here, but it's incredibly sharp, and the knight is under threat. You want to save the knight here. Apparently, taking the pawn on e4 is pretty playable still here for black. As after bishop takes f6 with check, king d7, rook is hanging, bishop is hanging. Apparently, this still works for black. But there followed knight takes e4. I think that's also the human continuation. But there is bishop takes knight, pawn takes, and rook e5 check. So here we have a position in which white is having 2 rooks and a knight against a queen and 2 pawns. It's a material advantage for white, but the question is, how well are these pieces, white's pieces, going to work together? Now, remarkably enough, huge shocker, black resigned in this position. And to be honest, I don't know exactly why. Maybe Bacrot was a bit too pessimistic about his chances here. And I think the main thing is that, let's say if you move the king away, white has the chance here to put a knight on f1. The knight next to the king is usually a fantastic defender. There are no checks on g3 or e3. So the knight is doing very well, and white has plans of getting the rook to the other rook to the d file and play for an attack against that king. And I have to say, it does look very bad, but apparently, okay, it's a battle for the initiative. There are no good checks, but black could have continued with something like f6 to attack the rook. The rook doesn't have that many good squares. You can go to h5, but then all of a sudden there is this idea to sack your e-pawn with e3. Bizarre idea. To be honest, I have no idea what is going on. But one of the tricks here is that if you ignore this pawn and play rook to d1, then e2 with a threat against the pawn, with the pawn against the rook and the knight, you can't take the pawn because of bishop f3, and one of these rooks will be gone. So things are far from clear. White is apparently better if you just move the rook away, but we don't know what happened. I mean, Bacrot just resigned in this position after rook e5. It would be nice if I can find out somehow what happened. Maybe some of the viewers has more inside information, so you can always drop a comment and let us know what happened. Why did black resign in this position? His position is bad, but it's probably way too early to hit the resign button at this point. Well, anyway, fascinating games, I would say, by Hans Niemann in this Sicilian Taimanov. Make sure to check out my own DVDs for chess base, with this move h5 being suggested in this particular position. Probably at some point I will tell you more about that DVD, but you can check it out now yourself. Make sure also to hit the subscribe button. I want you to support the channel. Thanks for that. Give this video a like, and then we will see each other very soon again. Thanks for watching.